and welcome. Today we are talking about all things language arts. Joining me is Rhonda. She is one of our Sonlight Language Arts experts. Rhonda, would you please tell us a little bit more about you?
Sure. I am actually, if you want to say retired homeschooler, you could, but I'm still teaching in a homeschool co-op, language and literature and writing. And I raised 5 children, and they have all subsequently graduated from college. And you would think, being the language arts freak, that my kids would have all done, some liberal arts. Oh no, they all went to Texas A&M, and they are engineers.
Oh, how funny.
They are well-rounded engineers.
That's great. So let's start. You mentioned that they're well-rounded. Let's start with why language arts is important, because it may not be everyone's favorite area, but why should we still make an effort, even if you have a more mathematical, scientific child?
Yes, absolutely. The thing is that words are power. And language arts is about communication, written communication, spoken communication, verbal communication. All those things are so important. And that language arts, when you think about it, it incorporates reading, writing, and here's my big word, thinking. You have nothing to say, nothing to write if you can't think and think critically. And really, intensive language arts, what that does is it extends to all the disciplines. You follow pattern, there's math. In reading, you are following the pattern of the story. There's your math. In history, you're looking at the same thing. You're looking at pattern. You're looking at logical consequences of behavior, all those things. So to me, language arts is foundational and extends into all the other disciplines.
Oh, and I love what you said, about thinking. I don't even know that I've thought about that you have to have those thoughts before you can write them down or any of those things.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Well, and here's the coolest part. Sonny, think of this. God created the world with what? With his word. Mm-hmm. And what did he leave us? His word. And in the beginning, what was there? The word.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Yeah. No, I've already learned something. That's amazing. I've never looked at it that way. I've always thought of it as, spelling, vocabulary, writing is its own separate thing.
Just tools. Those are just tools.
But that is great. And of course, Sonlight is known for great literature.
Yes.
So what skills, even before a child is able to read or write on their own, what do they learn from listening to those well-written books and then eventually reading them?
Oh my goodness, so much. It's the same thing when your child is listening to good pieces of literature, you right there are broadening their perspective. They're able to consider, well, how does this person over here feel? What are they thinking? And it becomes not all about me, but it becomes about considering, how do I fit in the scope of the universe? It also develops those critical thinking skills of, so if you did this and this and this, how'd that work out for you? And they can see that in story. And it's just like what Jesus did. He taught in story, and he taught us how to live and how not to live in story. And that's the same thing that happens when we read those wonderful, rich literature books. And let me look at my list because there's so much. I don't want to leave anything out.
Of course,
when you're reading full books, that's why it's so important that I love Sonlight, because we don't give a kid an anthology where they've got like little short stories and they're edited down. Oh no, we give the richness of the whole thing. Well, here's what that does. That creates the ability to think and sustain thought and put ideas together across an entire book. And you know what? College professors are saying that they're not getting kids that can do that. Mm-hmm. And kids who can read and then read all through high school, all through their elementary schools, those are the ones that are able to put together logical, sequential thoughts and see patterns. They can see patterns between one book to another and put ideas together. It also helps us understand worldview, helps us understand, okay, well, is that a good way to think? So you're evaluating ideas. And you may think these things don't start when they're young, but they do. whatever that world perspective is that of that author, that is what's being taught to your child. And that's why it's so important for you to be there as a parent, because you have the maturity and the ability to explain and interpret all these kinds of ideas and what that worldview is coming from. So do you turn your brain off when you're reading even the simplest story to your child? No, ma'am, we do not. We are thinkers.
Yeah, that is so true. Yeah. And I know one of the things I noticed in my kids when they started with Sonlight, we started back in preschool, was how good their vocabularies were, even from an early age, just because they had heard these words through the Sonlight stories.
Right. They speak like short adults. Like they really do. And notice that too. It's because they're getting those words within context. So it's not some sort of boring list, like memorize the vocabulary words. It just happens naturally. And that's the best way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I remember my son one time said something, in perfect context. And then afterwards he goes, what does that word mean again? And I thought it was so funny because I was like, you used it correctly. You must have heard that, somewhere along the way as we were reading. And speaking of the read alouds, of course, that's a big part of our curriculum, which is fun, and it doesn't feel like school for a lot of families because you are just reading stories together. But how do you develop those listening skills in young children? Because a lot of, small children can't sit still for very long. So how do you make sure they're actually listening?
Right. And I think, and you're going to think this is a funny answer, but how do we learn to listen? By practicing listening. That's what we do. And I think Sonlight does it so well because it starts off with those short storybooks. And then I think it's by the end of the pre-K, they're moving them into chapter books. And so actually Sonlight's pretty stinking sneaky because they gradually grow that ability to sit and listen. Now, some things that you can do as a parent, if you see, you have a wiggly worm and in the beginning, that's the way it is. And that's cool. When my youngest was, little and he's listening to his older siblings, what I'm reading to them, he would like be playing with iAloud. There were like certain school toys that he could play with, like Legos, or they can do a color page. And they really are listening. You may not think they are, but kind of keeping their little hands busy. And then he would hear something. He would jump up on the couch, like land on my shoulder and look at the picture for a second and then like jump back down, and that was his maturational level, but he was listening and they were asking questions. The other thing I would say is this, even at the younger years, Mom, it's all about you. It's your attitude. If you're enthused about the story, if you know something about the story, then front load. Show them, oh my goodness, you're going to be amazed. Like today, this is what we're going to read. And if you need to, then read about the author. Where did they come from? Where did this idea for a story come? Show your child a benefit gained by listening to this story. So, and I call that front loading, and you can front load yourself too. And another thing you can do to get those listening skills going is wait a minute, let me look at my notes for a second. By having them respond out loud to you. So sometimes I set the kids up and I say, okay, so you just listen for this one part because it's really cool. And when you hear it, I totally want you to get up and do whatever. Like if it's a little boy, sometimes because my boys I have 4. So it would be, you get up and run around the couch and then tell me what you just heard. So part of listening actually is allowing them then to respond verbally, and that'll improve their listening skills too.
Well, I loved what you said about movement also, because I have, my oldest is a girl and then I have a boy and they're 5 years apart. So the maturity levels are very different. The way they learn is very different. And my daughter used to just sit on my lap and listen to the story and she could answer everything. And, was very, the traditional school model of I'm going to give you information, now tell it back to me, works great for her. But my son has to be up acting out the story. He wants to draw a picture of the story. We enjoy like getting online and looking at pictures of the location.
All the things.
Yeah, all the things. So I love that. Yeah, it's okay to do that, to figure out what works for that child,
Yes.
you know, to make
Well,
sure
you're
that it's,
doing all the front load work, Sunny, and that's
yeah.
really good. That's called enriching it and making it wonderful. And the thing is what you're doing is training in your child for high school. Honestly, that is training for high school right there. Because before I open a book, if you're going to read a like Heart of Darkness with a high schooler, and like, oh, good, let's go to the Heart of Africa and let's talk about jungles. And it's dense reading. Joseph Conrad is very dense. Well, you know what? You've got to find out, like, when did this author live? Oh, what? He spoke 4 languages, really? But he's writing in English and it's not even his first language. Like, right? Like,
Yeah.
take time to find the amazing. Prime them, pump them, get them ready to prepare for whatever tale it is they're going to hear. And they're going to get far more out of it. They're going to be better listeners, better thinkers.
Yeah. And I think not giving up on a book too soon, that also reminded me, there were books that my daughter did not like. And so I was kind of dreading them when it came to my son, like, oh no, not this book again. She didn't like that one. But then he loved it. And it makes it more fun for me as a parent when the child loves it. So ever since he started, doing Sonlight too, I'm like, okay, we're just going to do everything and start over fresh. Like, we love all the books and we don't know. And yeah, you may find that a book you didn't like, you like more the second, third, fourth time around.
Absolutely, because people are different. But what we do, like when I'm teaching my high schoolers, is everybody going to say that they love to read the Metamorphoses? No, but can they appreciate what happened? Can they appreciate the writing? Right? So much is dependent, I think, on your attitude as the mother. If you're like, oh no, not this book. Well, what do you think your child's going to do?
Yeah, then they're going to think the same thing.
Right. So find whatever it is that's cool and glorious. Like there's lots of ways that things can be beautiful. Lots of ways that things can be meaningful. So be flexible in that thinking, to not have like this one path of what is beauty or what is meaning, right? Like, be expansive.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you do though when your child is struggling with reading comprehension? Maybe they are listening, but they can't retain, or they can't quite understand the information. How do you determine if you need to slow down or try something else with them?
Right. And I think it depends kind of where they are. If they have, you kind of first want to determine, is it a readiness problem or is it really a learning problem? And I think the way you could determine the difference between that would be, is if you really feel like they're not making any progress after you're faithfully teaching them, following what Sonlight says to do in that instructor guide for the language arts. Like, truly, it's rich, it's wonderful. Trust the process. And if you're faithfully doing those things every day, then, and you're not seeing, because sometimes it'll seem like you are trudging through the mud and you're like, oh my God, I cannot take one more word. So maybe that'll go on for 2 or 3 weeks, and all of a sudden, like, something clicks in their heads and they just go. And then you might come to another impasse, and that happens. And that's just the normal process of learning. And the thing to do is just remember to rely on what is in, the Sonlight curriculum for language arts, because it's so encompassing. That part of reading comprehension, again, is being able to think. So if your child is really, really struggling with, and you said struggling with the reading itself too.
Well, and with the reading, So, like, because I know I experienced that where one child read young and easily, and the other child could not remember letter sounds, for a year.
For like forever. and so that's okay.
No. Yeah. When it is a readiness thing, like, what is a normal range of readiness for reading versus
readiness can be anywhere. I mean, they're like bunny rabbits. And some people, I think parents sometimes get all like out of whack because they're like, oh my goodness, my 4 and 5-year-old is not reading at this point in my life. And you're like, okay, you need to take a chill pill, because some kids really don't get it till everything doesn't really come together till they're about 7 or 8 years old. So there is one line of thought where people don't even really begin formal instruction until they're like 7 or 8. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, they're just reading to their children. That works too. Other people, you're anxious to be doing all the things, and you want your child to shine, and it is hard. Like if your child is at, if you have maybe parents or in-laws who are like looking at you askance because you're homeschooling, and they're like, your child doesn't even know how to write their name, what's wrong with you, you're not homeschooling, so there is that. So if you delay, sometimes you have to delay because they're not quite ready. But so I would say 4 to 8. And then just remember too that some kids, you can get them reading at 5 years old, and then somebody else will start at 8. But I will tell you that it's just like a race. It's like bunny rabbits taking off at the start line. They'll all get to the finish line just at different rates. And they'll get there, and everything kind of evens out probably about 9, 10 years old, where whether you were an early reader or a late reader, all pretty much evened out. And then don't forget too that those littles, that's why Sonlight keeps those lessons on, having an actual pencil to paper in their hands, things like that. Don't forget that their little eyes really aren't fully developed till they're about 8 years old. So sometimes having them doing a ton of writing is kind of cruel and unusual punishment for them. That's why we do little bits, and what we do is meaningful. That's why.
Yeah, and that is an interesting point, because I actually did not know that until we went to the eye doctor a couple of years ago. And my son, he's 7 now, so he wasn't even 8. And they're like, oh yeah, he's farsighted, but that's normal at this age. Kids, their eyes don't come to their normalcy until they are about 8 or 9, which is something I had never heard before.
Right.
And I was like, well, I'm glad the eye doctor told us this. And so, yeah, we focused on, the Sonlight writing lessons, the copywork, the short little things, and then writing his name. But he could write his name long before he knew what the letters in his name sounded like, also. So I think, things like that, you don't have to freak out if they're not.
You really, I think, just keep, testing the waters and reintroducing and retrying. And again, that, you kind of mentioned it, there is nothing wrong with it. Just because your child can't physically write it down or physically read it, there is nothing wrong with, you want to be feeding their brain. And for you to be their scribe and to write down story for them is huge. Because what you want them to know, you're starting for them to understand that each of those letters are a symbol for a particular sound. And how you get there is different ways. Some kids catch that concept quickly, some kids not. But they'll all get there, unless there's a huge learning difference, like they have, a hearing problem or a, eye problem, or even dyslexia will eventually, work itself out. But being patient with that kind of stuff, and I think giving them the support of still reading good literature to them and talking to them about it and letting them talk about it, have them telling you story, you write it down, and then let them read that story back to you. And we know they're not really, but they are.
Yeah.
They are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It empowers them to feel like they, are reading some, and they might catch, I know both of my kids would catch certain words before others, and then it all started to click. But what resources might be beneficial if your child is struggling to read? How do you know if maybe you should have them evaluated for something beyond the normal age?
Again, I would say, if you're reaching, 7, 8 years old, and you've been faithfully, you've done, and that's okay. I want to make this clear that you want to make sure that what you're not doing is just phonics or just like natural language. And that's what Sonlight does so beautifully. It's a beautiful balance of what we call like natural language acquisition, natural, and the phonics. And we're using them all together. And that is the richest experience, that we don't, we've not thrown the baby out with the bathwater. We are using all the pieces all together in how you think. So I would say probably if you've been doing all the things and consistently, and they're like 8 years old and they really don't, they're still not putting sound and site together, then, some help probably. Another thing I would say is that for the fun tales that Sonlight has for the K language arts, even though is one of the best things you can do for your child. Again, it's about thinking, it's about meaning. They're going to understand language better and be able to read themselves if they're thinking. So even those little books, the first thing you want to do is flip it over. And I think the first one is Pam, and Pam is a penguin. And that, alliteration there, like all over the place. And you could talk about that, read about Pam the penguin on the back, do some research. You see what I'm telling you to do? I'm just telling you to put the meaning into it. And then I'm saying, and that's what you're going to do for a high schooler, but you're training your child on these lower levels. And then you're going to read the story about Pam. And you want to get it to the point where instead of your child going, that they'll get there, but to get them to be able to read that book, whether it takes 20 times or whatever, you help them find a different way to look at it each way. That's your job each time they read it. But you definitely want them reading it so they're going, Pam, I don't remember the whole book, but whatever it is, so that they're not just decoding and working so hard, because that's awful. Let them repeat it till they can read it smoothly. And then for that, another really great resource, and this is just within the curriculum, is that first grade reader set, and it's I Can Read. Is it I Can Read It or I Can Read?
I can read it.
I can read it. Okay, I can read it. So that one book that has the word list, and you might go, we got to read word list. I don't want to read word list. You're kind of cheating your child. I'm just saying. Because here's what happens again. Those words are within word groups and kind of rhyming and built the same way, just changing a consonant, in the front. And really, the best thing you can do for your child is play games with that. Let them read the word list, that whatever it is for the week, and then time them and get faster, or race with you, and what that's doing is getting that fluency. And that's moving their child's brain from here, because when they're going, they're thinking phonetically each sound symbol. Okay. When you're getting that fluidity and allowing them that time to read the page with fluidity, that's going back here in your brain. And that's how you and I read. When you're reading something, you're not up here going, who wants to read it? You've got to do that. So it's that idea of giving them the time and the repetition so they get that fluidity, and the reading is changing to the back of their brain is really what you want to accomplish here. So
I love that. Yeah. That's great. And yeah, one of the things that we've always done at the end of the year is then we pull out one of the readers at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
Because then the kids are like, this is so easy now. And they realize it's super hard at first, but it's not anymore. And so then they're what they've learned too.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's wonderful. Exactly. Celebrate all the things.
Yeah. Yeah. So some kids love reading, but they hate writing. This is a whole nother new set of skills that they have to develop.
Yeah.
So any suggestions when you're starting out teaching a child how to write to make it more fun and something that doesn't feel super hard, when you're starting that?
This is the part do you remember when I was talking about how when you're reading with your child and then maybe you're writing, and I said, so having them tell story, they can still tell story because your child can speak, and you're giving them all the other good literature that you're reading to them from, the rest of the core from Sonlight. So what you want to do is start modeling in those younger years your actual thinking process when you're writing down. This is the beginning of a sentence. So, okay, that's right. I need a capital letter. I'm going to put it
like that.
I literally talk out loud. I still do this for my high schoolers when I'm writing a thesis statement. I think of all the pieces and I let them see all the things that are happening in my brain. So that's one thing that you can do to support your child. Another thing to do is when you get those assignments from Sonlight that, usually the latter part of the week, you've got your writing assignments. There's no problem with front loading again, doing the talking together. And I don't think that you just send your child off into a corner and say, here, you write. Here's
Right.
your assignment. You write that. That's just mean.
Yeah.
And again, because writing is about communication, language arts is about communication. You want to develop all the pieces, it's not a one, you don't separate. Writing is really your thinking on paper,
Mhm.
right? So you want to show the thinking and you want to be a good model of the thinking. So front load, ask them about whatever it is, be their scribe, write it down, have them record what they say so that they can listen to it the next day. You need to draw pictures. If you need to say, well, okay, so what was the beginning? Oh yeah, okay, what was the middle? Oh yeah, what was the end? So help them along in the process. And those are those very beginning stages. And that makes it fun. And then celebrate every single thing. When you're looking at their writing, I go, oh my goodness, I see how you totally put the spacing in there. I can totally tell where that word ended and this word began. Really good. And then I said, how did you know to put a period there? So we're talking about, oh, that was a complete thought. We had a subject and we had a verb, we're all the things that we're talking about. What else do I do? I just do the best I can to make it fun. Sometimes if you have to get out special paper, get out special paper, if that helps. Get out the special pencil, because it's a moment. We're going to write down our thinking. But I think taking away that fear of like, oh no, it's a blank piece of paper. The reason why that's a fear is because if you don't have thoughts in your head that you want to talk about, that is a scary blank piece of paper. But if you've been fed and nourished with ideas and talked about it, you got something to say. And it's not so scary.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think one of my favorite things was when the IGs went to color and those story starter pictures were in color. Because my oldest did not have those pictures in color. And it's so funny to see it again with her younger brother. And he loves the story starters because and I love that the Sonlight Language Arts weaves in different types of writing from week to week.
They sure do.
You might have something that appeals to your creative writer, then you have the research paper writing and different types of writing. So I know a lot of people might think, oh, I'm going to skip over this one, but I think we both would agree, do not skip over those.
No.
Those skills, whether it's natural.
Right. And the thing is, okay, so maybe the describe dirt. Okay, so maybe that doesn't rock your boat, but that the idea is we're doing the descriptive paragraph or something. So find something that's more interesting to them, but keep the content true to the type of writing that they're doing. And don't forget too, and I don't know if you use these, but there's the Phonics Appendices in the back of the IGs. There's the spelling rules. There's report writing. And they even have in the Sonlight, IGs, they have the rubric and it's a simple rubric, but it's helping you to evaluate. And, honestly, I've looked at rubrics for colleges, for writing. And you know what the first question is that the professor is going to evaluate on? They evaluate, did the person answer the question?
Oh, nice. Yeah. Which sounds obvious, but it isn't always if you haven't been taught to do that, right?
Not obvious. Did you answer the prompt? And so you're teaching your 7-year-old, did they answer the prompt? So by skipping around, you're not really giving them that depth and breadth that they're going to need to be able to answer whatever kind of prompt that they're going to get. So that's an important piece to remember. And even if scary, when you think, oh, it's scary, I'm going to get to high school. This Writer's Ink is really a great resource because it has writing prose, it has ideas for poetry, it has cause and effect essay examples, has persuasive essays, it has full reports in here, research papers. It goes through MLA, APA, all the different types of formatting. It's all here. So you don't have to be scared out of your wits. It's it's there. And you can get your child through high school, and have amazing writers. But I will say the most important thing about writing is reading, 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 reading. Because you have nothing to say if you've not been thinking.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I love that. And I love that you brought up writer's ink, because I was actually going to ask, like, if you as a parent are not a strong writer, or maybe you're doing Sonlight because you want to read, but you're not a natural reader either. How do you teach and evaluate those older students effectively, you know, using the rubric or writer's ink or something like that, to make sure that you are, you know, grading those papers or those things that those kids are writing the right way?
Sure. And the first thing I'm going to say is the simple thing of, did they answer the prompt?
Mm-hmm.
That would be my first focus. And if you had done, and then do you remember the diamond notes from the third grade? We usually put in the third grade language arts. Well, that is pure gold. And the reason why is because that is the basics of any kind of academic writing, where they're teaching the children, here is a topic sentence. Here are 3 supporting ideas, and now we're going to round up the wagons, and we've got a conclusion. And what all you're doing in high school is this: they're writing a thesis statement, which is just a big topic sentence for the whole paper, right? And then all their topic sentences for their paragraphs are going to come from that thesis statement. And then they're going to use proof. They're going to use evidence to prove the points that they want to do. Well, where does that proof and evidence come from? That comes from their reading, from their text, right? So if you, when you're reading with your child, and remember we talked about reading comprehension, do you see how tightly all this is woven together?
Yes.
When you're doing reading comprehension and you're reading, I don't know, give me a book, give me a young book.
A young book, Red Sails to Capri.
Okay, Red Sails to Capri. Oh, I love that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're reading Red Sails to Capri, and if they're reading it to themselves, one thing you want to do is like look for, you ask them a question, you're like, well, where was that answer? And really getting that idea across to kids that when you're reading a book, that it's really a conversation between you and the author, and getting the idea that books are not like the holy manuscripts of whatever, that you should be able to write in those. And as simple as, when the kids are young, like putting a smiley face by their favorite word or their favorite part. And what that does is that allows them as a high schooler, then when they're writing, that they have a source, they have evidence, they have proof, and they know how to get that because you've taught them to look for where the answer is, where the proof is in those books when they were little. And so it's just a more advanced version. But I would say that the first thing that I always look for in a high school paper is I'm going to look for, did they answer the question? I'm going to look for content. I want to see their thinking. And is it that they're spitting back to me, or does it sound like they actually did commentary? Did they show me what they think about whatever the topic is? Have they proven to me whatever it is? I'm always going to look for content, and even little kids stuff, I'm going to look for content first. And then I will tell you this, and this might make some of you feel better. The grammar and the spelling and what else? Punctuation, all that kind of stuff. It's important, and it's important to do it well, because sometimes if you don't do it well, it can impede and conflict with the message that the writer is trying to get across, right? If it's that full of misspellings, it's difficult to appreciate the writing, correct? But an encouragement to you would be that those are book learned things. That's really the easy stuff that you can get out writer's ink and you can look up. And you can use spell check, right? As long as you know which version of the, homophones and that kind of thing. But, as long as you know what you're supposed to be writing. And then what the great thing is that it's the thinking, it's the content. And if you have fed and watered and fed and talked to your child through great pieces of literature, then they're going to have something to say. And you can easily fix those kinds of problems, circling the grammar, or, oh yeah, remember we needed a semicolon here. It's actually, like whatever, those kinds of things. And you don't have to be fearful of like, well, I don't know all that, or I didn't learn it. So learn it with your child.
I love that. Yeah. Because Sonlight's IGs, they do give you all of those notes. And
They
yeah,
do.
even like the grammatical rules that you
That's
may not
right.
remember, yeah, they are in there. And so I will say language arts is one of the areas where I like to kind of prep by reading those notes before I'm actually teaching it.
Yes.
Where other subjects I might just flip it open and ask them the question, but that is definitely one where like, oh, if we're talking about, two vowels together and which one makes the letter sound, or reading or capitalization, quotation marks. I do like to make sure I go into it kind of knowing what we're going to do. And you mentioned that content is definitely the most important focus.
I think so.
But so then how do you weave in like grammar, spelling, those things? Like, do you correct it as the child is learning, or do you wait?
I do. It depends on how much. Okay. So it depends on how much we've got going on. If essentially, the spelling is okay, but really it's the grammar that's glaring at you, or maybe it's something as simple as word choice, or maybe it's something like, but this would be for an older child, like you're really trying to impress upon them active voice. And I love Sonlight because they start at active voice way back in elementary school, way back. So all these things are taught. And again, okay, I'll just get off just one moment of my soapbox because you know how I feel about it. But that copy work, people, that copy work, copying good language and learning everything, the grammar, the spelling, the understanding of punctuation, even imagery, even parallel structure, all of it, that comes from that copy work. That's how Sonlight uses it. And that's so much more powerful and meaningful than filling out workbook pages of find the verb, find the subject, like, oh, that's a thriller. Just do it in context. So all that to say, what I usually do is I'll pick something, always go for content. And then whatever it is that seems to be kind of the Achilles tendon, then that's the thing that for a few weeks, I'm really going to focus in on that and see if I can't get some improvement. So I will circle or kind of point out. I usually like to have a verbal conversation, but it's more as an editor to a writer or as a friend to a friend, and talk about this is a great first effort. So let's see what we can do. And there's nothing that I ever write that I don't sit on it for a couple days and to teach them that writing is a process. It's not something to be hurried with, that we can go back, just like what you said, where you can go back and look at a book and enjoy the celebration of it. Same thing. What was in your head when you were writing something, let it sit for a few days, you go back and you see something new, and there you go. You edit, you redo. So I would definitely say I'll point out the spelling or something like that, but you want to make a focus element of whatever it is that you feel is like the most critical at the time. So always content, and then pick something else, and then you just kind of talk about the other thing.
Yeah, well, and I like that you brought up, authors do not submit one draft and that is their entire book, right? They go through a whole revision editing process. And so teaching your kids to do that, while they're young, it can only make it easier for them as they get older. I know you mentioned the importance of copy work. Are you able to get by if you just do the Sonlight Language Arts? Do you need to supplement? Is focusing on the copy work and what's in there? Right. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't really think you need something extra. I didn't use it, and my kids went to Texas A&M, and they're engineers, and they have doctorates, some of them. So and that's in STEM, but they could write, and that's what's unusual about them. And I didn't do a whole bunch of extra stuff. You have to depend upon, trust the curriculum, trust the language arts. It's been well researched, it's well documented. Copy work is one of the most meaningful ways you can do it. And it's not handwriting practice. Handwriting practice is handwriting practice from the handwriting books. That's just mechanical. That's how to make the letters. That's a mechanical process. Copy work, you could make it handwriting practice, but that's not the point of it. Copywork is, and I will say this again, copywork is like your core exercises for your body. It strengthens your inner self, your inner core, so that you can do sit-ups, so that you can do leg lifts, so that you can do arm lifts. All those things come from copywork. That's the importance of it. And that is how I kind of said it before. Do you want me to repeat? Kind of said it before? Or
no, that's great. Yeah, I think, but just stressing the importance of that it's not the same as handwriting,
No.
and really as our world becomes more digital, the handwriting is a good mechanical process, but if you think about professionally, you're going to have to type and things like that too. So,
right.
Yeah, as long as
and language arts includes handprint, cursive, and typing.
Yeah.
Right. You need all three.
You learn all of it.
And let me just point this out. Sometimes I've seen or heard moms go, but the language arts just take so long. Okay, remember what I said about it being foundational to in my world, the rest of the curriculum. It is. Because it's about communication. That's what history is. That's what science is. That's what math, right? Computation. Then what are you going to do with that computation? You use it for something. So it's foundational. So if you think about it, language arts encompasses reading, writing, public speech. It includes grammar, spelling. Did I name them all yet? Let me look to make sure.
I don't think so. Well, you brought up
thinking, speaking, vocabulary, reading, handwriting, spelling, grammar, public speaking, and creative writing.
Yeah. Yeah, so many things.
Those are all the skills. So yes, you're doing a huge amount when you're doing language arts, right? So that's why read, write, think. If you want powerhouse children, you read. And I'm just going to say, talk. You talking to them. And that's that part of that talking out loud to your children as you're thinking through something, or as you write it down, or you're writing a note to whatever. Use the teaching moments.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And what you brought up about, we know history because it was written down. But the things we learn about science are because they've been written or communicated to us. And so it really is foundational. And if your child is able to communicate like that, they will be able to excel and advance in whatever field they go into, or whatever they do. So
and they may be the weirdo too, because my child, he can obviously, smack down any chemistry, physics, or math, with his eyes closed probably, but he is also an incredible communicator and able to take really difficult ideas and communicate it on my level.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. Things that you don't know as much about, he's still able to articulate that to
He can get it down to a layman's terms because he was raised on Sonlight and Sonlight curriculum. And I will tell you this, here's a good story. When he was 8, he hated writing, hated it. Loved reading. I couldn't get enough books for him. He was a book pit. But that child, when he was, it was about 8 years old, this wise woman told me, she said, you know what? You're asking that 8-year-old boy to do a lot. You're asking him to think and use his hand and get messages from his brain down to his fingers onto a paper. And so she said, just have him copy good language. And, we did that for about 6 months. And I think that eased the tension for him. And then eventually he just started becoming this prolific writer. But I took off the pain of, for an 8-year-old boy, having to think and produce something amazing at the same time.
Yeah.
So
that's so true. Yeah. And knowing your kids and what they're ready for, and striving when they're younger, and then allowing them as they get a little bit older to combine all of those processes together. Rhonda, thank you so much for discussing language arts with me. Like I said, I feel like I've learned so much, and I've been an avid reader my entire life, and you brought up so many things that I had not even thought about. So thank you so much. And then always, if somebody's confused about what level their child's at or what they need, they can always reach out to our Sonlight advisors,
Absolutely.
take the assessments online. And
They're great. Yeah.
so thank you. I really appreciate your time today. And hopefully I think we gave a ton of great information.
My pleasure. I loved it. Thank you.